Hey guys, we're getting really close now. Happy Tuesday. We have one more day of reading that we've sort of geared ourselves up for through all the fantastic work you guys have been doing, all the thinking you've been doing, all the discussing we've been doing, and I'm really proud of the work that you guys are putting into this book. And a lot of you have been coming up to me and saying, Mr. Kaz, I'm really connecting with this story. Mr. Kaz, how do you pick such great books? How do you this and that? Well, remember, I'm not magic, these books aren't magic. You're finally beginning to do those, to practice those quality habits of a quality reader. You're really truly beginning to read. And so it makes you able to fully connect with everything you've been reading. And because of the nature of this book and historical fiction, you are able to get into this time period that you thought was so foreign to you when you were learning about it in social studies, but now you're seeing why all these things you were learning make a difference in the lives of real people. See, that's why Mrs. Quagliana and I got together and said, you know what, these units would fit really, really well together. And we collaborated, which, as you know, is very important in the writer's process, but also in the life process. We collaborated and we said, how do we make this history real? How do we make it meaningful? It happened over 230 years ago. How do we... And this is what we came up with. And this story is very reflective of everything that the families were going through. And you got to see that also in film version in the movie The Patriot that you watched across the hallway. And I really am super, super glad that you think that this book is awesome, because I do too. And again, like I said, it's not magic on my part or on Mrs. Q's part or on the book's part. It's the fact that you're really taking the time to understand, get involved in the text, and connect with it. And you've been seeing that in your journal entries. You know, you're taking the text from the actual book, you're using your organizers, and you're moving over into the quiz time, and you're taking really just the facts, and you lift directly from the text, and then you're putting more meaning into them in the activities that the worksheets provide you, and also that your journal project is providing you. And so I really want you to see how all of these things that seem still and lifeless in the text, you bring to life as a reader. These things that maybe we're able to passively do in TV and movies, we're able to actually directly take that from the text and really make it mean something because we can understand it and connect to it. Now that I've given you that reminder that we talked about a little bit today in class, I also want to catch those of you who maybe weren't in class today or were just kind of the rapid fire discussion that we had kind of didn't sink in as much. We talked a lot today about how these characters have really changed, and about how war and the consequence of having a war directly on U.S. soil has changed people, not only in a spiritual way, in a religious way, not only in an intellectual way, what they know about life and what they know about other people and what they know about other countries and this and that, also in a very interpersonal way, a social way. The way people treat one another and the way people understand one another has really changed as a result of this conflict and this war that's happening on U.S. soil that's being very, very real. I guess really isn't the word, but it has to be an adverb. So it's being very really felt, felt in a real way, I guess I should say, by these characters because it is so immediate. And we talked about how, you know, that's a big translation, or that's a big shift for us that we have to translate, because the fact of the matter is, in other countries, people are being profoundly affected by war that's happening outside their door. One of our students shared that she has a cousin who has a friend in Pakistan who just went out, a 5-year-old, a child, went out for chips at the corner store and didn't come back because the violence was right there. She was kidnapped, and she was abused, and she was killed. And I mean, that's something that people are still experiencing today. As a matter of fact, in the news just today, it popped up, a school in Africa was attacked by militants, and 29 boys were killed simply for believing another thing or practicing a different way of life than the terrorist group that attacked them felt they should be practicing. And it's a very real consequence of war that people kind of lose their sense of what's right and what's wrong, and how to treat one another. And I'll give you an example of one of the things that we talked about today specifically. I'll read you this from the text. This was from Colonel Parsons when Tim goes to see him to say, listen, you've got to get somebody to do something. This isn't right. He wasn't stealing our cattle. And this is what war has done. This is a leader in this military saying, war is hard. Sometimes we do a lot of things we don't want to do. A lot of very good men have been killed in this war, and all we can do is hope that it's been worth it. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe in the end we'll conclude that, but I don't think so. I think it'll be worth it despite the death and destruction. No, I don't think Sam stole those cows, but I can't prove it, and neither can you. Who knows? Maybe he did do it after all. Maybe he had some kind of arrangement with those other men so as to throw suspicion off himself. We talked about the fact that he doesn't believe that. It's everything that he's seen that makes him justify in his own head, and maybe just for himself, that all of the injustices that happen are for a purpose. And all the deaths that happen that shouldn't happen are for a purpose. And that's really a big part of what's going on. I mean, look at how many people are selling out their friends, their neighbors, and how many people are just justifying all of this stealing and killing and all of this in their own heads because they feel like maybe somewhere it'll be worth it. And when they don't, when they see a resolution to a conflict that's negative, there's the potential for them to just disappear and check out from life altogether, as we saw happen with Mother. Remember, I'm going to draw your attention back to our 4 biggies discussion that we've been going over all throughout the year. That when we resolve, I put a resolving door instead of a revolving door, ha ha ha. I try to make little plays on words to entertain the people who actually do use this resource. We know that character is who we are, and who we are affects what we do, and what we do impacts the conflicts that we get into, and those conflicts make us change what we're doing, but we change what we're doing based on who we are in the first place. And only when conflicts get resolved, which is why I chose a different color here, can we really take a step back and look at everything that's come up over and over again, the themes that have come up over and over again, and they really change us as people. Now, sometimes when conflicts are resolved in a negative way, they have a negative consequence and a negative impact on who we are. We see that with Mother. We even talked about how when we found out that Sam was going to be executed for this crime that he didn't even commit, Mother reacted with a little smile and said, that's not news, I knew that. And we determined that the reason that she's been acting as distant and has been drinking as much and has been really depressed and not able to really bear up and handle the tasks of everyday life, the reason that happened is because she had already resolved the conflict of Sam being arrested in her mind. In her mind, just the fact that he was arrested meant that he was a dead man. As dead as her husband, even though he hadn't even had a trial yet. And it was because, in order to make a point, General Putnam was going to execute the people who he saw as being a threat to not only his power, but also his ability to keep the troops together and from straying away from their duty and doing illegal things by showing consequences no matter what the reason was. And also his way to connect with the civilians, because you got to remember, nobody really was behind the thought of, even if they were behind the cause, they weren't behind the thought that the Patriots were going to win the war. They thought it would be great if they did, but they probably wouldn't. And so he felt if he lost public support by letting troops just go off and do whatever they want and treat women and houses and supplies and whatever as they saw fit without any rules, he would lose not only his own troops to doing all those illegal activities, but he'd lose the civilian support that he had in order to be really an effective leader in his military. And so this whole cycle of seeing people do that has really broken Mother's spirit, and it's been kind of her becoming a different person as a result of the way this conflict seems to be resolved on a really a daily basis in this patriot military. And so, again, we keep going over this in our minds, this sense that really war changes people. And there's not a lot of black and white, right and wrong. It's really a gray area that spans across, and it's different for everybody, and people react differently to it. And I want you to keep that in mind as we come to the close of our character journals, because that's really going to be important for you to keep up with as you're writing those journals. Guys, great stuff. I'm really proud of the work you're doing. I hope you are too. I'll see you tomorrow to discuss more of this.